Hey guys, we're in Washington, D.C. today in Union Station. As you can see, I've been thinking a lot about Trump's move to send troops, National Guard into various cities, Washington, D.C. being one, Portland being another. But the focus of today's video is actually going to be about, I think, an issue much more important than whether he should be sending troops or not, whether he's occupying cities, whether he's doing this for political gain, but about First Amendment freedoms about that. So we're gonna sort of elevate the discussion today and jump into that topic. A little warning, a little disclaimer, this isn't a high dopamine, quick fix, political junkie sort of channel. We're here for deep dives into substantive issues about constitutional law. So if that interests you, stay put. If it doesn't, there are a million other channels to get your dopamine rush about a political issue that angers you today. So we're going to do a quick breakdown on what are the basics of presidential authority for when the president can send troops or call up the National Guard to a city. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that topic because I really want to get to what I love, the First Amendment. But most Americans know since after the Civil War, we have posse comitatus law, which prohibits the federal government from sending troops into cities and occupying them. Why? Because the North did this in southern cities and the South felt like they were being occupied by a seemingly foreign power. So we generally don't allow that. Now there's many exceptions to posse comitatus. We have the Insurrection Act that allows the president to send in troops or guard in certain exceptional circumstances. We also have the ability of the president just to be able to protect certain federal properties in cities and areas and to be able to send them in under his inherent executive authority. So the last time this was done was in LA in the 1990s after the arrest and abuse and attack on Rodney King when we had the uprisings. There, the governor of California asked that President Bush actually send in the National Guard, and so there was no legal controversy over that. Today is a lot different sort of a scenario because, for example, in Oregon or in Illinois, both the governors there have signaled that they don't want troops, they don't want the National Guard to be present. So it's a very different sort of scenario. Also, DC is a very different situation. So the National Guard in DC, there's no governor of DC to call up the National Guard. So the way that the status works here is that instead the president or his designee in the Pentagon has the direct authority to be able to call up the National Guard. So when you see troopsmen, National Guard present here, they report directly to them, and it's a lot easier in DC to be able to do that. What's the overlay between Trump sending troops into various American cities, DC, Portland, maybe Chicago, and the First Amendment? Well, when you're at a time of all-time high political agitation, as we are now, think about the Charlie Kirk assassination, think about other events that are going on, and we have protesters who are active in the streets, as they should be. They have a full right to express themselves. We have other folks who are going to throw some violence into these actions, and then you add a military component to that. There's a real risk of political violence. And the best way to be able to determine who the wrongdoers are and what the real narrative is by allowing a free people to be able to document this and record it in a way that's most effective to them, which means this device, digital video technology, usually in the form of secret recording, because if you think about it, if you're out on the streets, say with an angry Antifa agitator, and you've got a camera in their face, bad things are probably going to happen. But if you've got a lapel camera pin on or something else that's recording surreptitiously, you can get a real story and be able to document that and show that to the American people. And maybe it's Antifa, maybe it's the Proud Boys, maybe it's a troop member who's acting abusively, and I don't know how this plays out. What I do know is that the right to record is that most precious freedom and liberty. Think about it. If we were to go back in time and we're in the 1920s and I get a story as a journalist that there's a policeman who comes to this park and takes bribes, and I sit behind this tree and I write down in my notepad everything that goes on, you would laugh to think about a law that would prohibit me as a journalist from writing that down. But today's form of the journalist notepad is exactly our technology that we use, the digital camera, the iPhone, to be able to provide an even better account of what occurred. Because sometimes when you write notes down, you get them wrong. Sometimes when you remember a story, you get the details wrong. But this device never fails. So when states like Oregon move to prohibit its use and be able to do storytelling and news gathering, it creates a real First Amendment problem. We have a pending petition for a writ of certiorari before the Supreme Court that's asking for review. We challenged Oregon's law back in 2020, and Oregon has one of the most unique and most restrictive recording laws in the nation. In Oregon, no matter how public the situation, you have to give public notice to individuals that you're recording them. So if you're in a park and there's a loud political rally going on, you have to let everyone know that a recording's occurred, otherwise you have a criminal violation in place. Now, it's interesting because the law built in two exceptions. On one hand, if you are recording an Oregon police officer doing their duties in public, you're allowed to record without giving any notice. And at the same time, you're also able to record a felony that threatens human life. So if you know someone's going to be killed or potentially could be killed, you can record that. How exactly you comply with that, we don't know under the law. Nobody has a crystal ball. So why did we bring the lawsuit in the first place? My client, Project Veritas, wanted to go in and be able to film some of the violence, potential violence that was being reported about Antifa, about Proud Boys in the streets and their clashes with police. And while Oregon law allowed you to get at least some police recording in, it wouldn't allow you to get those really crucial conversations with members of Antifa, members of Proud Boy, other rather extremist groups. And then at the same time, there was a public records advocate scenario going on where the public records advocate who's supposed to ensure transparency in Oregon government kept resigning. There were several resignations and allegations that the governor was pressuring that office. My client wanted to use these tools of undercover reporting to be able to have conversations with members of the staff and be able to share that with Oregonians, with the American public about what was going on, what was hiding there. Because there's a very common sense theme here. When wrongdoers and crooks and corrupt politicians know that you're recording, when you come in with a light and big equipment, nobody's going to tell you the truth. But when it's done secretly and when it's done in a truly open place, like here in a plaza, well, that's the best opportunity to be able to get that information to the American public. And when states like Oregon come in and remove that tool from the hands of activists, from the hands of reporters, from the hands of documentarians, a real First Amendment problem happens. And that's my job to resolve that. So like I mentioned at the start of the video, I've been thinking a lot about the overlay between President Trump deploying troops, National Guard out to Portland, and our pending petition for a writ of certiorari before the Supreme Court. Now, when this sort of situation happens, the best tool to be able to show exactly who the wrongdoers are, and we don't know who wrongdoers might be. You might have radical activists on the ground. There's plenty of news reporting about Antifa. It might be accurate, it might be off. There's news reporting about what the Guard and the troops might do to civilian activists, to protesters. And we're not casting judgment or doubt ahead of time. But what we are saying in our very pure case before the Supreme Court is allow the people to be able to go out in public, allow them to be able to record these interactions, show what guardsmen like the folks behind me who are, I'm sure, pulled out of their job and doing the best they can as human beings to perform their duties, show what protesters are doing and saying in an authentic way, and get that information out to the public. But what you shouldn't do is make a law that removes that ability, that makes criminals out of political protesters, it makes criminals out of journalists. That's what Oregon's done, and that's why this case has worked its way through the federal courts and is now before the United States Supreme Court. We're having a lucky day in D.C. because we're in the midst of a shutdown that's going on. The town is very quiet, eerily silent, as you can see, very little activity around us, so we're just having some fun with that. But as we're going through and we're exploring these issues, if you know American history, you know that a lot of key reforms for social movements came out of undercover journalism. We go back to Nellie Bly from the late 1800s. She checked herself into asylums under a false name with a false diagnosis to be able to document and show to the American people just how ugly and awful conditions were there that led to improvements in our mental health institutions. We've got Upton Sinclair in the early 1900s in Chicago. He wrote The Jungle. He documented, by being a fake worker in the agricultural and meatpacking industry, just how bad meatpacking plants were. That led to the creation of the Food and Drug Administration in the United States. And we go forward from there, and we have examples of using undercover journalists to expose civil rights violations, charging higher rents for blacks or minorities, mortgage loans being declined based on race. The only way you get that valuable information is through that secret lens. My clients, James O'Keefe, Project Veritas, do this all the time. They regularly capture the true opinions of politicians and political operatives that vary significantly from what you see reported by legacy media. And that's a tremendous value to the American public. And I won't forget my friends on the left at PETA, Animal Legal Rights Defense Fund, who go out and they do great work at being able to document abuses at factory farms and be able to shine a light on that for the American people. They use the power of the lens equally so, and I'm proud of their work there. That's why if you're a responsible citizen, if you're a civic-minded American, we can elevate this discussion above whether we're excited about Trump having troops in a particular city or not, and talk about this First Amendment right. And I think it's just serendipitous that the timing happens to be that Trump is sending troops into Portland at a time when we're asking for the basic right to record to be recognized by the Supreme Court. We hope it will be. This week, my wife and I are in D.C. We have a few meetings and a few things to attend. We'll have a few more clips that we record here as well. I want to thank you for coming with us today and hearing about my case a bit and not getting mired down in the politics of troop deployments. And I hope you'll join us next week as we jump into yet another constitutional controversy. Thank you.